The shooting range. In this episode, pages of history, the Black Widow, air triathlon, early biplanes, and metal beasts, an unstoppable French predator. With the Starfighters update, the French aircraft tech tree received a new top fighter jet, the Mirage 3C. This machine performed its maiden flight in 1960, becoming the first major production model in the Mirage 3 family. This multi-role fighter was equally good as an all-weather interceptor and an attack aircraft. This versatile machine is propelled by a turbojet engine with an afterburner. The self-sealing fuel tanks are housed in the wings and the fuselage. Under its air intakes, the Mirage has a twin 30mm cannon with up to 250 rounds of ammo. Of course, the engineers didn't forget to put a radar into its nose. Plus, there's lots of options to put its hardpoints to good use. This bird can carry 250 and 400 kilogram bombs, up to 72 unguided rockets, guided AIM-9B, R-550 Magic 1, and Matrav R-530E air-to-air missiles, as well as the AS-30 Nord air-to-ground missile. That makes the Mirage one of the most dangerous predators in a dogfight. Moreover, its aerodynamics give the aircraft good maneuverability, which, coupled with powerful armament, makes it easy for the pilot to destroy their enemies one after another. Fuel consumption, however, is very high because of the afterburner. So, top up your fuel tanks for at least 20 to 30 minutes in the air. This will certainly not improve your flight performance, but will ensure you're able to finish a battle before the fuel runs out. Faced with such a wide choice of weapons, you might be puzzled. We can recommend taking one R-530 and two R-550 air-to-air missiles. The former has a longer range and is perfect for finishing off runners, while the latter can withstand overloads of up to 30 G, hitting even the most agile targets. And don't worry if you run out of your guided weapons, your good old twin 30mm DEFA cannon can destroy any target with a couple of hits, and you have enough ammo for 2 or 3 of the enemy. Alternatively, you can choose a set of 2 Magic 1 missiles, which come with an additional rocket engine. That one will improve the dynamics and the climb rate, but you'll have to leave the cannons and the belly pylon behind. With great air performance, the Mirage can easily achieve air superiority and leave no chance for the enemy team to get any air support. And when the skies are cleared, it's time to hit some ground forces. The best armament for that would be the 72 rockets and the AS-30 air-to-ground missile. With no ballistic computer on board, the Mirage is less efficient during assaults. And at BR 10.3, top anti-aircraft vehicles are more than frequent. So, to improve your chances, get as close to the ground as you can. Find an approach that would surprise your enemy and avoid any lines of fire, using landscape as cover whenever possible. Finally, when you run out of rockets, you can use your cannons on lightly armored vehicles as well. Here's a bit of an excuse for your train of thought. Imagine you've come to a conference in England. You need to discuss some weapon supplies, but for now you're just sleeping in a London hotel. All of a sudden, a shockwave pushes you out of your bed. Bombs fall out of the skies. Fires start in buildings around. German bombers roar above. And the Royal Air Force pilots are powerless to turn these unwanted night guests out of the country. Also, your name is Jack Northrop. What do you do? Exactly. You create the world's first specialized night fighter, even though your country hasn't even entered the war yet. And it was a tricky thing to do, by the way. At the time, even the Royal Air Force themselves had a very vague understanding of what a night fighter should be like. They were trying to down Heinkels and Dorniers with turret guns of the Blenheims and Beauforts. Some foolhardy pilots even took a death or glory approach and took off to the dark skies in Spitfires and Hurricanes. Sure, they already realized that night fighters needed radar, and they even started installing experimental ones on the newest Beaufighters, although with mixed results. But the picture was still incomplete. Take a look at the P-61 Black Widow. Its engines alone have a dry weight of 3 tons. To be able to spend at least 3 or 4 hours on a night patrol, they need 2 tons of gasoline and half a ton of oil. Avionics in general, and a radar in particular, which by the way the US didn't have at the time, add another 1.5 tons. 1 additional ton goes to the armament, the turret, and the ammo. With all these, there's little left for the airframe itself, and this plane would need to take off and land on temporary airfields in the dark, meaning short runways, as well as low takeoff and stall speeds which were a must. Needless to say, the plane also had to have a high climb rate, enough speed to catch up with modern bombers, and high G maneuver capabilities. Any aircraft designer at the time would argue that such a plane was impossible. Northrop, however, had no time to argue. He just got down to work. He created enormous flaps along almost the entire wingspan and added spoilers to control roll, leaving the rudimental ailerons as an auxiliary mechanism. With the cutting-edge radar equipment, which the USA had finally developed, the P-61 turned out to be the most expensive fighter in the world at the time. During late 1942, its price was 5 times the price of the Hellcat, the most expensive single-engine American fighter. The Black Widow was years ahead of the British Beaufighter and was getting ready to become the worst nightmare for the Luftwaffe bombers, but it didn't. Great Britain decided that it didn't need to increase the already astronomical debt it had accumulated in the 3 war years. They thought it would be better to keep on flying the Beaufighters and the new Mosquitoes. True, they were no match for Northrop's creation, but at least they were homemade. So the few P-61s that flew in Europe were piloted by Americans alone. As for the Pacific Front, the Black Widows were of little use there for a strange reason. The Japanese pilots never flew at night. The American forces couldn't figure out why the Japanese Air Force never used the opportunity to hit them at night, until they searched one of the downed Japanese bombers and found a sextant. Turned out that the Japanese navigators could only dream of having radio navigation technologies, and until the very end of the war, they could only use the stars to fly at night. And that's not good enough to raid an enemy in the dark. There were occasional night attacks and reconnaissance sorties, but only low scale. They were certainly not that troubling to justify the creation of such an expensive and advanced night fighter. Nevertheless, there were a little over 700 P-61s built during the war. That was more than enough to warrant air superiority for the US during the night. We've just had a triathlon among top fighter jets, and now it's time for the earliest biplanes. Please welcome the American F-3F2, the German Heinkel 51B2, the Soviet and Chinese I-15 BIS, the British Gladiator Mark II, the Japanese Kai-10-2, and the CR-42 from both Italy and Sweden, where it was localized into the J-11. Wait, where's the famous Chaika, you might ask? We would be very happy to see it in today's contest, but at BR 2.0, it would be unfair towards all other contestants. So, having paid homage to this mighty bird, we'll start the trials without it. The first competition is all about maximum speed. We will see the contestants dive in an attempt to go as fast as possible. The pilots are waiting for the signal at the altitude of 4 kilometers. Let's go! All the planes start their increasingly quick descent. The American F-3F2 is the first to finish with a result of 620 kilometers per hour. Next are the Italian and Swedish pilots with 580 kilometers per hour. A little later, the Japanese and the British planes finish, showing 550 and 540 kilometers per hour, respectively. They are closely followed by the Soviet and Chinese I-15, whose speed topped at 510. The last to finish in this competition is the German machine, with the result of 470. The next stage is assault. Some lightly armored vehicles would do well as targets. We picked the Gaz MM-72K and the SDKFZ-6 Drop 2. The pilots will need to destroy them as quickly as possible with the armament they have. Let's start. Off they go. Both I-15s are the first to handle their targets thanks to their 6 rockets, perfect against LAVs on the ground. The German plane, with its 10-kilogram bombs, finishes third. The American F-3F2 doesn't take much longer, since it too has a couple of bombs and a large-caliber Browning. Other contestants, however, need more time. They don't have any suspended armament, and thus have to make do with hull-mounted machine guns. Our third and final trial for them is capturing points. 1 ground point and 1 naval. The participants will have to capture and then take off as quickly as possible. We'll start with mixed battles. The Poland map will provide an excellent point near the edge of town. Let's go. The planes are approaching to land, and the German pilot is the first to start the capture. Their machine needs less time to slow down because its floats do a great job at that. Other pilots lag a little behind. Now that the point has been captured, it's time to take off. But the HE-51 can't, because the floats, again, do a great job at slowing it down by creating friction. As for all other pilots, the I-15s are the first to take off. Then comes the F-3F2 and the rest. How about a naval battle then? Obviously, the Heinkel has a great advantage here. The German plane successfully lands and captures the point, while the other contestants... wait, where are they? Time to sum up the results. The HE-51B2 takes third place. It can't boast the best flight performance, but it's pretty useful in mixed battles. The Soviet and Chinese I-15s share second place. Thanks to the rockets, the I-15 BIS handles ground targets with ease, and it's maneuverable enough to get some edge over enemy aircraft. And finally, the leader in this event is the American F-3F-2. All thanks to its high speed and powerful armament. It can quickly penetrate ground vehicles or simply tear enemy aircraft into pieces. Well, after some flying, it's time to get back to the ground to answer some of your questions. The first question was sent by a player called Slimum. Which gun has the fastest fire rate of all the guns in the game? Hi there. Hey, I hope we pronounced your name correctly. It's a difficult one. The fastest gun in the game is the American M61 Vulcan. With this, you can send 120mm rounds at your enemy each second. You can find this angry wasp swarmer on all modifications of the F-4 Phantom II and the F-104 Starfighter, as well as on the Japanese Mitsubishi T2. Dgish asks, do you think Japanese planes fly on pure propane or pure alcohol? Or why do they ignite with the first hit and it can't be put out, not even in the wing-gripping dive with engine off? Well, the fuel of the Japanese planes is not actually connected to how flammable they are. It's more to do with the lack of both good armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Such solutions did give them lower weight and better performance, but certainly didn't improve survival rates. Another question comes from #14 Zarate Timothy Miguel. What airplane from Britain has more speed? Hi Timothy. So far the fastest British fighter jet in the game is the FGR-2. Its speed near the ground can reach 1,416 kph. Gonzalo Matos writes, I would like to know if the fastest plane in the game can catch the slowest missile mid-air. Hey there, Gonzalo. We had a similar challenge in the shooting range episode 186, where planes tried to catch missiles. Of course, we only included those cuts where they flew nicely together for a while. But in some attempts, the catch ended in a crash. And the last comment for today was written by KGamer40. Which tanks you recommend in realistic tank battles from any country? War Thunder is full of great tanks. In medium class, the Sherman or the T-34 are great. In heavies, we love driving the German Tiger H1. As for tank destroyers, we can recommend hopping into the M18 for a fresh and dynamic approach to battle. If you want to play a certain nation and need help with choosing the best vehicle for you, you can watch our Climbing the Ranks With series. Well, looks like we're done for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, which premieres every Saturday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. Don't forget to leave a like and learn to use a sextant. Yeah, just for the sake of it. And see you next week. Scriptwriters are trying to be funnier than me.